Hello, welcome back to Honey and Stag for another digital book launch, which, we're thrilled about. And we hope you, the viewers, are also really enjoying our time together. And what, for me, is even more exciting is the fact that this week we're able to welcome back an author we've spoken to before, but had such a fabulous conversation, and I'm really looking forward to again just finding out the inspiration behind this author's work, and how it's been received, and the purpose behind it. So, without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to welcome back Gary Finnan. Hello again, sir.
Hello there, Jackie. How are you doing?
I am doing really, really well. And just saying to the viewers, it's wonderful having had our previous conversation that was so enjoyable, to be able to do over. Thank you for writing 2 books so that we can continue a conversation. But having to say that the focus of our conversation today, is a really different kind of text. So for anybody who wasn't able to join us for the previous conversation, we discussed Gary's novel, Billy Tapper's Zillionaire. But today we are going to be talking about Hector, a love story from, what's the title, Gary? A love story from beyond the ground level?
No, at ground level. And
At
beyond.
ground level and beyond. You see, yeah, see, I'm beyond the ground level. No. Do you have the book there with you?
I do, yes.
Could you hold up the cover for us? Look at that beauty, an absolute beauty. Gorgeous. And that's really where I'd like to start, if you don't mind. But
Yeah.
before we do, just again, for anybody who didn't join us last time, to introduce Gary and say that he is an award-winning inspirational author, designer, entrepreneur, and creative expression mentor, amongst many other things as well. But again, thank you. Welcome back. And if we can start by saying that book cover, beautiful book cover, who designed it for you?
Well, this book is a reprint plus of the original book, and the cover, the picture on the cover was originally my daughter's when she was in 6th or 7th grade. But when I republished at the end of last year, I decided to do an upgrade. So I went on a search for a hedgehog image, and I stumbled upon this image, and it took me probably 6 months to find the artist. And she's an architect that lives in Greece. I spoke to her once. She gave me the rights for the image, and now I'm trying to track her down again so I can send her some books. That was her only criteria. And I should know her name offhand, but it's I shall look it up in a second.
Okay.
Hold on, Elena Chirandu, and she was actually born in Russia, and she has these great images that she does. But when I saw this image, I found Hector, not only because of the little look on his face, his little leaf where he's feeling vulnerable and a little protective, but most importantly are the daisies, the little daisy you see here. I got to reverse myself on the here.
Yeah.
The daisies play such an important aspect or part in this story. So anyway, and it's been great because, if your book is mediocre and people fall in love with the cover, that's good enough for me.
Yeah, but we're going to reveal of how this book is way beyond mediocre. So I think, please, viewers, if you, in buying and getting hold of this book, you get a beautiful cover, but you also get a text that is supremely pleasurable in the read, but you wait while that text turns round on you and it gets you to do some self-exploration, and we'll discuss that with the author. Now, on that cover as well, it says that it is an award-winning book, Living Now. Yeah, a silver medal winner, said book. So again, I wonder, could you talk us through the whole process of living now? What is that, and being awarded that, that covetous prize?
Well, being mediocre, it only got a silver. It didn't get a gold, right?
It's not mediocre. Oh, but okay.
No, all jokes aside,
Mm.
in America, there's the independent publishing book awards, and when I first wrote this book, which we'll talk about being what I call my puke up book, there was a lot of fear around it,
Okay.
and validation in some respects of what have you done, because you make yourself vulnerable out in the world. So I submitted to a couple of contests just to see, and to my surprise, I got the silver medal for this Living Now, which are inspirational books. And I hadn't really thought about the book being inspirational, but it got the award, so now it's an inspirational book, right? But it was funny because this book kind of continually makes me cry, and so hopefully it doesn't happen today. But I was standing in a restaurant with a client, and I got the text through on my phone that I won this medal, and I burst into tears. And it was very interesting from the point of view of what I think for a lot of writers. Firstly, my belief is if you don't share, it's not really writing. But get an outside validation, not your friends, not your mother,
Yeah.
not your brother, sister, auntie, uncle. It really made a huge difference to me. And my wife keeps saying, "How much more validation do you need?" But we do tend to go through life looking at the sky is falling scenario as opposed to the good stuff. So this for me was, and it was the right kind of, for me, this was a great validation on a very personal level about a very, very personal book. But at the same time, it kind of got me excited about, well, hold on a minute, maybe I can write something else. And you were the recipient of that last week when we met, and Billy Tapper came out of jumping into writing a novel as opposed to a kind of a smaller, more intimate book.
It's really sort of like pleasing to hear that Hector, almost like gave birth to Billy, because seeing again that trajectory of you as an author, I would like to say if that was what you were wanting to do, I think, those stepping stones along the way, I think they've happened,
Thank you.
and I can't wait to see what comes next. But so would you say then that Hector for you was the start of becoming a published author, or is there more before that we haven't yet had the pleasure of?
No, this was a huge leap. Um, when I was about 45, I was in my 12th midlife crisis, and and I really just decided to put something out there that, and I went through Balboa Press. I went and did some classes and stuff like that, and kind of went through a traditional route of trying to get something published. And at the end of it, the original book, which was slightly shorter than this, came out. And it's been very interesting because I've had people want to represent it, and I haven't been ready. So,
Okay.
kind of like stewing in my own juices, so to speak. And that's why, because I didn't think it was equally ready, and it didn't really convey entirely the lesson that I wanted to learn from it myself and share with other people. And again, it's not a self-help book. It's not a follow these 5 steps scenarios. It's a genuine sharing of a journey of sorts. My wife does joke and say to me that, It's a little personal, and you should have chosen something bigger than a hedgehog to hide behind. So, but it's, you know, I'd written other stuff, and I still have bags of stuff like everybody, of stuff. But what was great with this was it gave me all those little scraps of paper around Hector's house and around my house. Finally found a place to go, and they start off as little ramblings, and then later in the book they become a little more expressive. So it's very representative of a writing journey, or an expression journey is maybe a better way to put it.
But I love how it's made up of different aspects, and again we'll comment on the structure. But before I ask my next question, I should say to anybody watching, if you have questions for Gary, please feel free in the comment section, whether you're watching us now or if you watch subsequently, and Gary will get back and answer those questions. But for now, my next question is, and you know what's coming, it's probably along the same lines as your wife, really. Was it always a hedgehog there that you felt could give expression? I mean, you know, the animal kingdom is vast and beautiful and exotic, but you went with a hedgehog. What was the...
Yeah, I was thinking about that this morning. I thought you may well ask me. And the book that affected me deeply was Duncton Wood, and I just bought all the series off of a misprinted, or what do you call it, out of print website. And I was looking for it on my bookshelf. I must have put it in the other bookshelf because I was going to bring it and hook up. But there was a mole. It's about a colony of moles, and I can honestly say when I was about 12, I fell in love with Rebecca, the mole, and I think that sat somewhere back in my head. And so, and then the other aspect was obviously Winnie the Pooh. I love the philosophical aspect of it, the gentleness of it. There's Enid Blyton, not Enid Blyton. Who's the one with the bunny? Peter Rabbit.
Yes, yeah, yeah, and Jemima Puddle Duck, and yeah, Beatrix Potter.
Beatrix Potter, right? And so all of those, the simplicity of them and the imagery, which, you know, I just to digress slightly, is, you know, when I was writing this book and I was sharing it with my family, and my kids were small or little, and one day my daughter came up and she said, "Here, Daddy, you know, I've drawn all the pictures for the book." And those are where these books and that these images that are in the book are rudimentary but beautiful. And she listened and she heard the stories, and she'd come up and gave those to me. So in many ways, that I wanted Hector to be that small book that you can just put in your pocket and read 5,000 times as the moment takes you, as we've read all those other books. Winnie the Pooh, how many times have we read Winnie the Pooh, you know?
And you know, that idea that it's a story. I think it's a story for so many generations. You know, you can. I would love it, and though it's not going to be possible because of the age that I am now, but I would love the opportunity to read the book at various stages in my life, a little bit like the book is split into various stages in Hector's life, because I think, you know, as we change and develop and grow and learn things, you know, if we read a book when we're 15 or we read a book when we're 30, how do we experience, you know, the novel or the ideas? So, yeah.
Well, I'm sure we're going to talk about this, but I'm going to challenge you on that, because it's not about reading my book per se at the different stages of your life. It's about reading your own stuff at the different stages of your life. That's what really, in many ways, you know, I wrote this over a period of time, but some of these stories go back to feelings and thoughts a long time ago. And that's why it's so important for people to write little bits. And we'll talk about that, I'm sure, in a moment, capture that. But sometimes I'm amazed when I go back and I pull out an old book journal full of stuff and bits of paper, or a napkin off of an aeroplane or something, and I go, "Who the hell wrote this?" Fortunately, or
You did.
unfortunately, my horrendous handwriting is like, "Yep, it was you." And days trying to decipher it. That's probably because we had a couple of whiskeys on the plane. But anyway, but the reality is, that's the beauty of writing, is you get to measure your own progress through time. So I would, again, challenge you to say, that's why you write now, so that you can go back and read in the future.
And I would say to you as well in this, before I get you to do the first reading, I am convinced, I mean, I never met you before. Kelly Lacey introduced me to your work, and both Billy Tapper and Hector have come at totally the right time of where I'm at in life, and that's spooky that not just one but two books should do that business. So I thank you for that. And please, would you read us your first extract?
Okay, so I thought best start in the beginning. One of the things that I try to put at the beginning of every chapter is what I'll call a Hectorism, and these are just little thoughts that Hector has, and you'll see them when they roll out in there. But I'm going to read right at the beginning before I read the first chapter. I think it kind of wraps everything up in some respects. All answers lay brooding beneath that thin veneer of dust that had settled on his life, a dust that makes great beauty slightly dull. Much the same way a thought perceived through a gossamer screen of fear obscures a life better lived, manipulating one's perspective, fueling reality, and a discontent at not having enough. Prologue. At once. Sitting there in the dimly lit burrow, Hector drew a breath infused with sweet chamomile tobacco. The smoke pulled through slowly. The smoke pulled slowly through the old clay pipe his grandmother had used as she rocked him to sleep when he was a pup. Hector drew deeply on this pipe and held his breath unconsciously. His calloused paw tightened around the pipe. He considered his life now, and upon reflection grew agitated and resentful. Finally, breathing out, he let out a long, winding plume of smoke. It curled and twisted, floating up to the roof of the burrow, where it hung above him as a dull cloud of pity. From the darkness and the comfort of the overstuffed chair, Hector watched the light and the shadows from the fireplace bounce around the room. Flashes of yellow, orange, and black, leaping, elusive shapes dancing on the walls, chasing the feelings around his chest, mesmerizing him into a vacant trance.
Thank you. Hector and his life and that reflection. And starting at a certain point, there's a moment early on in the book where it's a book that sets him off on a thought process when the book falls out and hits him on the snout. And being a little bit, sort of analytical, and I just wondered whether even in that image you were trying to say to the reader, that books unlock, that books sets off, that those things that might be between the pages are the things that help us find ourselves. Was that true, or was that me just being
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. And we all love books, and books it's a thing I struggle with digital books nowadays. I want to smell a book. I want to put stuff in it. I want to bend over the pages. I want to underline stuff. And sometimes there's secrets in books. I'm reading a book at the moment called The History of Love. And I every second page, there's a secret in there for me. There's a part there that is my story and my connection with that. So when you start thinking about books being repositories of emotions and thoughts and possibilities, which you and I spoke about before, I mean, it's like a treasure chest when you open it up. And particularly when there's books where, whether it's a journal or whatever, where people write, and that happens to be the book that falls out onto Hector's snout, is his wife's, Hillary's, own journal. And like life, you open the pages and something is revealed, and a new journey invariably starts because there's new information.
That new journey. Now, Hector's writing ramblings, but Hector also physically rambles as well, does he not? Heads off into the woods, and that space for reflection, consideration. And I just wondered, do you yourself do that? Do you take yourself away into nature to do that kind of reflection?
Yeah, I'm very lucky to live on an 18-acre farm in South Carolina. And I spend a lot of time out in nature. It doesn't matter where I am. It gives you space to breathe. But here's the thing that's interesting with Hector. He's trying to figure out how to get out of his own head. Even his body, he shuffles purposely. It's written for him to shuffle purposely, because when our mind closes down, our body closes down. That's why we end up having ailments. It's why we end up losing our vibrancy. And I have a good friend of mine, that Tom Mitchell, and he talks about, when he does his classes with students, he talks about killing people, and they're like, "What? What are you talking about?" And he said, "Yeah, I kill people with words." And you can kill people with your own words. You can kill people with your own thoughts, because you can change a life. You can put someone into depression. And so, in some ways, Hector, in his moment and his discontent, is killing himself because he's so discontented. So he goes out and he shuffles around. So yes, great, get out into space, but there's also the expansiveness of your mind that you need to open up. That's kind of the metaphor for him getting out. And later in the book, which is the before in the book, because we go back in time, of him going on a journey. You've got to shift and change your location. You've got to shift and change your perspective. Otherwise, nothing changes.
So, shifting and changing perspective in that title, At Ground Level and Beyond. That concept of at ground level, how did it come to you? Why do you call it that? What, the spatial distinctions.
I think it goes back to your first question about why a hedgehog, because you don't get much closer to the ground, and an earthworm didn't seem that exciting. But anyway, so at ground level, as you read in the book, when Hector is born, he falls out onto the cold earth, and his first contact is not with someone or his mother; it's the hard, cold ground. And he continues to spend his life on the ground, and also, ironically, later in the book is where he finds his epiphany, within the ground and upon it. The beyond piece was an addition, because, as I said, this is a second version of the book, and it kind of gives you a little bit of hope that there is something beyond being stuck on the ground.
Yeah. There is. I wanted to know, how long in the making?
Too long.
Really?
Yeah. Well, a long time, because the first ramblings that are in the back here, I call it Scottish haiku. Small, frustrating pieces of writing that were found on scraps of paper in my own house. But some of those go back a long way, and before I was even married and before I had children. And fortunately, in doing that, some light was shone upon my life, and my ramblings became less depressing, I suppose. But we all write angst. I mean, I think if you can't write angst, then you shouldn't be doing anything. That's what's so beautiful, but it was a long time in the making from the point of view of not believing in myself or my ability or capability to believe that I had any value or worth. I think I spoke to you before about vulnerability. And until you have a turning point of where you realize that true vulnerability is about true strength and power, and I use the analogy of your biggest weaknesses are actually your biggest strengths, where, like Hector, he might have gone the long way around, but the skill sets that he built in doing so became unique characteristics. And then one day you go, oh my goodness, I have a set of unique skills, and I don't have to lie on the ground anymore saying, "Woe is me," So,
yeah. That realization. I saw it. Well, I do hope that I think I can see in you and from our conversations that you've been on a similar journey. I wondered when I first read Billy Tapper, and I thought, how much is that a reflection of self? And in our previous conversation, of course, you told me the inspiration behind that, so maybe not such a. But in reading Hector, how much are we reading you?
I can't deny it. As I said, I should have chosen something bigger to hide behind. It's everything I write is true, whether it's Billy or this, and it's because somebody said, I think it's a cliche, write what you know. So so I wrote what I knew, but this was also I think the right way, a cathartic process of working through some stuff. And I don't want to get too heavy from that point of view, because in hindsight, it was quite liberating. My own epiphanies that came out of this, I actually began a whole business process that came out of it to evoke your element, and to provoke an epiphany, and to invoke your element. And it really is that process of, if you don't go into discovering who you are, then you can't nurture that. And if you don't nurture it, you can't act upon it. And ironically, that's DNA: discover, nurture, act. And we all get told it's in my DNA. This is who I am. But there's a whole thing around epigenetics that say that's not true. And particularly in COVID and the changes that we're making to our life, we're changing ourselves. We're changing our behaviors, whether it's incremental or small. We've all shifted and changed. Our outcome, our emergence from this time. And I think that's why there's this sudden interest in Hector. It's why in the different reviews, it has more resonance, because people are reading it and going, yeah, I've been at ground level, and I want to emerge from this. And ideally, what we're trying to do here with this book is give people permission, give themselves permission, not me giving them permission, give themselves permission to evolve out of a sense of unworthiness or discontent, whatever. And that was my journey. I was pretty grumpy Teddy for a while, and coming out of this and having an aspect of going, there's a better way to live. You can't do that unless you express. You hold it in, it doesn't work.
That need to be able to let things out, but I wonder is, very often it's understanding how to, finding a way how to let things out. And again, when we come towards the end of the book, I would like to discuss how you got to put those, the extra pages on that are there with it. But before we do, there's a couple of aspects or that, again, to explore with you. One of the things that a statement made about the book, it's not our abilities that define us, but rather our choices. in the whole notion of reflecting on the choices that we've made.
Right. And
Yeah.
sorry, you did just cut out there on me.
Oh, sorry. So looking at the notion of that we're defined rather by our choices rather than by our abilities.
Right.
And then the sense of that reflecting on the choices that we've made.
Yeah, you know what's interesting, and I think it says something on the back of the book from the point of view of what we call the vicious circle. When you're 4 or 5 years old, someone says something to you. It's not necessarily true, so you spend the rest of your life collecting evidence to prove that it's true.
Mm-hmm.
And you turn around, you're. I think it's. And Don Miguel Ruiz did the 4 Agreements. I don't know if you've ever read that. He's done the 5 Agreements now. It's fantastic. Really simple. Be impeccable with your word. Don't take it personally. Don't make assumptions. Always do your best. And then the 5th one was be skeptical, but listen to what people are really saying. So, so from that point of view, understanding, like that, he tells a story in his book where a mother comes home one day and she's been at work and she's tired, and the little girl is singing around the house, and she says, "Shut up, you got an ugly voice." And the girl never sings ever again. And so in many respects, we all have aspects of that in our life where we believe things that are not necessarily true. And for me, it was like, well, you can't spell, you can't write, you can't, and I believed it for a long time. And then one day I said, well, what if it's not true? And that, back to your question, making new choices, not to believe in what your perceived ability is, but testing your ability and actually proving that, you can make different choices. Maybe that's the answer. And those choices will change your life. Whether that's writing down 4 little lines on a page or writing a whole novel, it doesn't really matter.
But the effect that can have, yeah.
But it can be life changing, literally.
Now, I am going to ask you to read a little bit more, because I just love hearing you speak out the words. It brings even more life to the text. So where are you going to take us now?
I want to take you to Hector's epiphany, right? So at the beginning, he's in discovery. So now, if we want to evoke that epiphany, or provoke, I should say, the epiphany, it's got to happen somewhere. So I'm going to read you the pre-chapter rambling. Slowly the light emerges, opening my nature to all that I have become, all that I always was. Little paths of light guide me, should I choose to follow this stumbled upon destiny amid bluebirds and swallows. Chapter 5, At Last. Hector sat on the grass outside the burrow, face to the sun. For many days now, with dreams on his mind, he had trudged back and forth without really noticing the small white and yellow daisies flowering around him, surrounding his everyday life. Humble, insignificant, yet abundant and beautiful. From afar or from above, they all looked the same, naturally yellow and white, spread out in an even blanket around him in the meadow. The day was warm, and Hector slid down onto his belly and placed his snout on the ground, stopping for a moment. He looked a little closer at the blanket of flowers in which he lay. Hector was surprised. All around him were little flowers, some tall, some short, some thick, some thin, some a little whiter, some a little greener, around the different hues of yellow in the center. Little faces of sunshine that looked to him, all smiling freely. One tiny flower made him think of wee Emma. She was still a child, just green and budding with life, enchanted with all things around her in the forest. Other flowers caught his eye, a straggler. Sorry. Hotel. Sorry. Sorry about that. The UPS guy just arrived.
No worries, no worries. I love the fact that here we are experiencing your life, out there and thinking, oh, I wonder what's going on. So long as you are not being attacked or in danger of any kind.
No, we're good. I think there's a couple of rowdy hedgehogs coming up the driveway, but we're
I
okay.
was, I was going to say it's when there's going to be the drawing back of the snout and the gnarling teeth. Then I know that's when we need to worry.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to take us back into the yeah.
Sure. Another flower caught his eye, a straggler pushing above the others, vibrant and bright, calling, "Look at me." His Sophie, splendid and independent, free-willed. Yet another flower stood out, this one a splendid beauty, standing slightly alone from the indistinguishable clumps. Hilary, he thought, in full bloom and blowing in the breeze back and forth in time with the earth. Other faces now appeared amid the blanket of nature, this blanket of friends, families, lovers, and long-lost memories. Reflections of all past and present, the abounding gifts he never noticed so nearby, revealed through a veil just beyond his eyes, hidden behind his hurry, fragrant reminders of his dreams and loves. Gently, Hector picked the faces of pure sunshine and gave each a name, from the earliest memory to the end of today, when he had watched his grandchildren play around the entrance of the burrow. With this bed of flowers, he wove a chain, one by one, memory by memory. Hector was surprised by the length of this chain of life, a string of shining faces, each touching his heart, interlocked across his lifetime.
The daisies. Now, if I might say, you make a dedication, do you not, to your daisies? Is that correct, or your little flowers?
Yes, yes, yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, to my wife and to my daughters. Yes, very much so. Yes.
And when you talk about Hector's two daughters, so Emma and the other one is Sophie, is it?
Yes, Emma and Sophie. Yeah,
Sophie.
they're the middle names of my daughters, and
Yeah.
I thought, yeah, as I said, to just slide that in there, it was kind of good. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And are they happy that they've appeared on the pages of the dad's book?
Probably mixed. Same as my sister and my father and my mother, and everybody got a little opportunity to pop in there, and they weren't always happy with the vulnerability that we put in there, because I was pretty honest with how I portrayed that, albeit not well hidden behind the hedgehog.
Can we talk a little moment about the relationship between Hilary and Hector? Because, again, a relationship not without its difficulties, but what they seem to come to, or what Hector seems to manage to get to, because I wonder if Hilary was there all along with this, I'm not sure. But the willingness and the ability to talk to one another.
Right.
And try and work things out. There's a lovely moment when she says to Hector, "Did you find it?" And she says, "The ghost you were chasing."
Right.
So it's almost she has a better understanding of him than he does of himself.
I was watching a program. I'm trying to remember it right now. I was watching on TV last night, and they were asking a very famous singer and about his creative process, his persona, his onstage performance, and he said, "I might be the producer of the songs, but my wife's the producer of my life." And I think many men, and again, this is hopefully men read this book, because in some ways that's who I'm sharing it with. Is we're so busy thrashing through the flowers to better, faster, more, particularly in America, bigger, better, faster. for more is it's how life is supposed to be. And then you get there and realize that, you know, you've trashed everything on the way there and left everybody in chaos behind you. I've done that. You know, I've always owned my own businesses, and I've caused havoc on the way. And there's times where you go back and you look, and many of us don't appreciate our wives, our families, our siblings, in many ways, that how they've supported us. And they're almost these invisible cast of characters who, you know, show up. But again, the epiphany is to stop and go, oh my gosh, it's not all about me. It's not about my journey, because there's a collective journey. And with Hillary, she does it twice. You know, she does it at the end of chapter the at 50, I think it is, and then she gets a reprisal in the Renew book, where I go to 60, Hector at 60, and it's her gentle acknowledgement of his abilities, his desires, and she's the one who wraps up the scraps of paper and puts them in a book, because he never will, because he doesn't see the value in them, because they're just, you know, they're just ramblings. But for her, she's the mother of, and I think we spoke about this a little bit when we spoke about Billy Tapper's mother.
Yeah.
We need mums, you know, we need mams or mothers, whatever, because they kind of, they nurture us, and that's what Hillary does, and my wife, for that matter. Yeah.
I also think in it that there's a sense of teamwork as well. You know, that idea of with the family, with the burrow, with the earthworm farm. So, you know, it takes two to make things work. I got that sense of, you know, that together, and then it comes to the point, and this is the thing that I found really challenging. Okay, so it's maybe a little bit oversharing but the sense of the grass isn't necessarily greener elsewhere, and the looking at the grass that you've got and tending to the grass that you've got. And I wondered, because in a previous conversation where we've talked about potential and possibility, and, you know, and looking forward, how do you marry those two aspects?
And I always go with what pops into my head, which can be kind of dangerous, right?
Yep.
But I remember being, and don't hold this against me, but I was at a Bee Gees concert in Johannesburg, and as one does, and they said, you know, we're citizens of the world. And I think about it a little bit like that. You've got to be where you are. And when you're there, be fully there. Now, that doesn't mean that the grass is greener somewhere else, because you will go to other patches of grass. You will transfer, you will change. And, you know, even Hector himself, you know, when he gave up the slug farm where he was farming his slugs, that in some respects, he should have looked at that and went, what are you complaining about? You know, the grass is greenest.
This is cool. Yes, yeah.
You know, keep farming the slugs. But the reality was that he had to move to another place. And so it's really about being present to where you are, and not constantly looking for, again, back to bigger, better, faster, more. So physically, you know, looking over the fence and saying, I want to be there. If you're going to go there, understand that when you're there, you've arrived there, and you're present to where you are. It's not about always chasing the next thing. If that makes sense. It has been something I've been thinking about a lot recently, because when you write stuff and you write it in one context, and then people turn around and start to ask you, well, how does that mean? I've been thinking about that a lot recently, but it's about being present to where you are. And if you're not where you are, you're constantly looking and that's pretty discontenting, to feel that angst, and I think a lot of people feel that now. I mean, there's such a huge
Mm.
level of what's next. We don't even know what's
Know
next.
what's
We don't
next.
even
Yeah.
know where the grass is. Never mind
Mhm.
seeing a greener piece. We
Mhm.
don't. We can't get out of our houses half the time to see where the other grass is. You know.
That's right.
So,
And in this, in the current circumstances where, you might have even had the grass taken away, and things like that. So it is, I think, this is certainly a time for reflection. And I think where possible, that idea of saying, this is where I am for the moment, these are the restrictions, my life is within these boundaries at the minute, and to be to be dealing with that, to be feeding into that, as opposed to thinking, I want to be there, I want to be doing that, I want to be elsewhere, maybe.
beautifully, I couldn't have put it better. Thank you. And it is important from that point of view. Um, and I hadn't quite thought of it in that context, but it kind of goes into the starting to go into the end of the book, where I start to talk about time,
Mm,
and where we are and how we perceive our lives. It's it's sitting in the moment, so that
mm,
you can understand where fits in context to your life. Hector ends up having a dream and being in a burrow, and that's his reality check. He almost gets this opportunity to see what the grass would be like on the other side, and he gets to make a choice, and he gets to decide, which way he wants to go next. Um, yeah, this, maybe this is why this book is resonating a little more. It's because we're asking people to, I use the word emerge. How do you
mm,
take a moment to imagine how you emerge, not how you leap out into it? And again, part of my evoke process that I go through is, you can't go from where you are now to a leap into the future. You have to go through a form of transition. And that transition, we call it the knot hole of pain, or maybe the burrow of pain. Maybe that's, but Hector had to go through that burrow of pain. But if you take pain as an acronym, you know, perseverance, aspiration, innovation, and most importantly, nurturing, right? And that's what we forget to do. We forget to be gentle with ourselves.
mm,
And that's, I think, what Hector eventually learns. And he finds his release through writing, to be a little more gentle with himself, and not
mm,
jump to, I need to got to do this and I got to get there. And I'm hoping that, people realize that, and I see this chrysalis with this butterfly, and as we gently emerge, instead of, dragging and fighting our way through
mm,
it,
mm,
it can be beautiful, it can be fulfilling, and it can be where you start to, like he does when he puts his head down in the flowers, and start to see what's around you, as opposed to just being so busy to get to this other piece of grass on the other side.
mm, mm. Powerful, powerful words. And so, could we have the third reading?
Yeah, well, so I was kind of wondering what to do on this, but so I thought I would leap. Um, I would leap to a little philosophy that I pulled together. Right as I was going through my stuff, um, and trying, a lot of what I've done through this book is, it's just my own trying to work out my own stuff.
Mm,
And as I said, if you don't share, then it's not real. So there's been a lot of people who have been the recipient of, hey, I have this idea, and shared it with them. And so one of the things that came up was, thinking about, what if my life was 24 hours? It really kind of brings you back in the context of bigger, better, faster, more, and let me get there. But imagine so I'll just read this. Imagine your life was 24 hours, and we could track the advance of time. What time is it in our life? Then we can figure out what to do with the time we have ahead of us, rather than worry about the past that cannot be recovered. When you were born, your 24-hour clock began ticking for the first time. According to the World Bank, life expectancy for the average human being currently numbers 78.4 years, 76 years for men and 81 years for women. The insurance industry, the banking industry, the world of monetary standards have established actuarial tables and helped them to govern the fiscal rules of life and death. So, if 78.4 years represents our average lifespan, we can assume that our clock will hit 24 hours or midnight when we reach that age. Some of us will live longer, some less. We know that each of the 24 hours represents 3.267 years of life lived on our clock, and at 12:44 a.m., you're 3 years old. Likewise, 3 hours after living on the 24-hour clock is the same as 3 times 3.267 years of life, or 9.8 years. Therefore, at 3 a.m., you will have lived almost 10 years of life and begin your approach to adolescence. When you reach the vibrant age of 20 years old, it is 6:24 a.m. in the morning. Most people are rising to get ready for work at that time. On our clock, you're rising to meet your life as a young adult, passionate and full of promise. At 9:18 a.m., you turn 30. You're married, and do you have children by then? What does this morning mean to you, to your emerging life pattern? Have you begun to live in reason for gain versus passion for expression? At 12:44 p.m., you turn 40 and are working in your third career. Were you married and already divorced? Your kids almost ready to leave for college in the next few years? You start to wonder what happened to your passion. As a person of 50 years old, you're looking at the clock and it shows a time of 3:18 p.m. and it's approaching dinner time of your life. You have less than 9 hours left to live, remaining on the 24-hour clock. What will you do? What burns inside you, calling out transition? What would it feel like to be in your element? Another perspective might be a person of 60 years old is looking at the clock and it shows a time of 6:22 p.m. They have less than 6 hours remaining on their 24-hour life clock. However, they've spent the past 10 years present to their passion, creating equilibrium in their reason for living. A sense of wellness embodies all that they do as they live in a state of grace. We applaud them for living fully. We admire and envy them for knowing the difference and taking the chance they have avoided to pursue the pursuit of bigger, better, faster, more, and asking what is enough. Better still, why stop at midnight?
I love that bit. Why stop at midnight? Why the limitations?
Right.
And your reading brings us to a perfect moment to ask about, so in in the second iteration of the book, when adding Hector at 60, were these other sections that you put on, were they there in the previous iteration of the book, or were these added on as well?
These were added on. I put a final chapter in, which is called At 60, I think. And it's really Hector coming to terms with, assuming 10 years later, that his ramblings that he's written might now be little poems, and they're a little longer, they're a little more sophisticated, and they're a little more thoughtful about his life. The other two, the piece that I just read you, it kind of sets up the question of, so what are you going to do about it, right? Are you going to think about it? And then I move into, I take my Hectorisms and I regurgitate that story, and I can maybe give you, and I ask the question, imagine possibility of sorts. He could run, he could hide, he could survive like this, but he could not live like this. Hector wonders how he got to this very now. How did he miss so much on the journey? He had lost the ability to see love and beauty in the world. The possibility seems overwhelming in a life where change creates fear. And then a Hectorism is Hector sat not knowing what to do with the knowledge that everything he needed was here, right around him in plain sight. So I asked the question, a question of sorts, because I don't want to be so definitive with it, but what have you avoided in your life? What is available to you? And then I asked you, well, what is the resolution to that? And take the moment to write something down. And then I follow on at the end where I want to prompt you into writing your first own rambling, 3, 4, 5 lines of just try it. And then go share it with someone and see what happens. Something, just that communication, just that connection, just that sharing will create new conversations, will change a relationship or a thought. And then I expand it out into say, okay, now carry it forward, see what happens with it. So again, it was not an intent to try and do a 5 steps to get quick stuff. It was very much a gentle nurturing to say to people, it's okay. Share your thoughts, share your feelings, write the words down, and then more importantly, express them for other people, or maybe express your thoughts and feelings and then share them with other people. And it's just a reflection of my own epiphany and transition into what I think is effectively a better way to live now than I was living back then.
I wonder, because of where it might have happened in your own life and where it happens in Hector's life, do you think that an epiphany like that is destined to be at a certain time on the clock, or do you think it can happen at different points on people's clocks depending on what is happening for them?
Well, ideally, the sooner the better, right? But my daughter comes to mind with this. When both my daughters were trying to decide what they were wanting to do with their lives, careers, both of them decided not to go to college. And as I said, my daughter, who is now a master dog trainer, and she was just returned from South Africa, where she spent 6 months training high security teams and their dogs. And I always remember, so I took her through this evoke process and some of these questions, and she read the book, and she looked at me and she said, "Why do you only do this for old people?" And I was like, "Oh," and we haven't really gone down that path yet, but I recently worked with a young guy who was at the same point trying to, what does he do next? And so asking yourself 5 questions. What is my message in life, or the promise that I make? What is my purpose? Why do I do this? Who are my people that I associate with? Where is the place that all of this comes together? And then a little more practically, what is the return on investment that I get? And it's so simple. If you take each one of those: message, purpose, people, place, return, and you put one word to it, it's really difficult. Most people's head explodes. But if you put one word to it, and then you take those 5 words and you craft what I call an essence statement, or a small piece of poetry language that really evokes all of the elements of who you are, and you get to play with that word craft. Words are fantastic. The trouble is, we use the same language. We've used the same language our whole life. And when I spoke about Don Miguel Ruiz and the 4 agreements, we made agreements. I'm this, I'm that, whatever. Well, how do we shift that language that wasn't necessarily true? And so this is a genesis, or a catalyst, I should say, to give you 5 new words for the reemergence, coming out of your burrow. And it's a really fun exercise, and it's so simple. But take that message, purpose, people, place, return, give yourself 1 word, and then see what those words are. And in many ways, the language that the 5 words you will choose now will be very reflective of who you are now, and however many years brought you to this point. The challenge is going into that pain, which is a beautiful thing, not a bad thing. Perseverance, innovation, perseverance, aspiration, innovation, and nurturing, and looking at it as a positive light. And then you come out of it and you create 5 new words. And it's interesting, because then you've got a language to live by, and you've got a new language to have a conversation about yourself with other people, instead of talking about the same old stuff in the same way, which maybe didn't really get you anywhere. So I try to keep it hedgehog simple, right?
Beautiful, beautiful. Gary, I'm aware of the time,
Yes.
but just all that you've just said now made me think of this. Okay, it's always a pleasure to talk to an author about their work, because it's, as you say, words are fascinating, and why people put words together on a page and the message that's there, the story that's there. But I think with Hector, I think it's a book that just does so much more than give you a pleasurable read. Yes, it is, without a doubt. But it's a challenging read. And then with the fabulous section at the end, it's a really practical, it's a practical piece as well. I mean, even as you've been talking, I've been trying to think about those 5 words, I think, well,
Right.
what would I put against them? And, just that thing of trying to get the most out of life wherever we are in life, and whatever that means about our grassy patch, wherever that might
Mhm.
be. I think, yeah, as I say, I think this and our discussion has been more than just a talk about a book.
Right.
It's, yeah, I
If,
don't think.
if I can throw one thing in, you just made me think about while you were talking, and why it's important to write something down. Um, if you think about writing 5 lines of poetry, or call it a rambling. Rambling doesn't put pressure on you, right?
Mhm, mhm,
You don't have to have formal structure. Think about this. Those 5 lines in a world of 7 billion people have never been written in quite that way. Think about that.
mm,
That's how unique it is. And you might. What's the chances of someone writing exactly the same words in the same sequence, in the same way, with the same emphasis? It seems almost improbable, but it is so likely. And that's
mm,
why that's what makes it so unique and so
mhm,
beautiful. 7 billion people, if you sat them all in a room, could not write the same thing.
mm, mm. And so the unique beauty, the unique magic of what we are capable of producing, if only we give ourselves, and it comes back against that thing, if only we give ourselves permission to do so.
100%. And
Yeah.
and and again, Hector is very definitely not about giving people permission, but it's giving them a pathway through the woods, that should you choose to take this journey, it might be interesting, but you've got to go on it by yourself. There's no get rich quick 5-step Tony Robbins things. It's this beautiful thing where you've got to get out of the chair, like in the very beginning. Hector had
Mm.
to get out of
Had to get out of the bird. Yeah.
and he had to get out the burrow, and he had
Mm.
to go out into the dark until he saw the moonlight. And metaphorically, that's kind of how I write. There's a reason behind everything, and it's not even for me to tell you about it. You've got to reveal it yourself, because your message, and that's why I love poetry, because it will reveal itself to you relative to you.
Mm.
I might
Mm.
be thinking from completely differently,
Mhm.
but how you read it and what it expresses to you, um, all you can hope is that it opens your chest and lets something fly out. That's
Mm.
the most you could hope for.
Mm. Gary, thank you for a most, I would say, a most magical time, um, discussing Hector, discussing our choices, discussing where we're at in life, and what we choose to do with all that. I wish you all the very best with this new version of Hector, and I look forward ever so much for when your next book is out, that we might do this again.
Oh, I would love
Thank you.
that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and see you soon. All the best. Thank you again for being with us for this launch. It has again been such a pleasure. I hope the conversation has sparked off some thoughts for yourself. I hope in getting hold of a copy of Hector, you have such an amazing ramble through the writing and through the woods. And do challenge yourself at the end. I think you'll be really surprised at what comes out. But for now, it just remains for me to say thank you to Gary, to Kelly, Lacey for holding all this together, and for you viewers for watching with us. Please keep tuned in on our social media for news of who our subsequent authors are going to be, and we look forward to seeing you back here again for more book tales and book discussions. Until then, bye-bye for now.